Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the School of Self-Worth. I'm your host, Nicole Song. And today we have such a fun guest for you. And honestly, I wish I had met her just a few years ago because today we have on Cassindy Chao, and she is an expert matchmaker. So, yes, she is someone you can go to support you to find the perfect person and match. And she is the founder of Ancient Wisdom, Modern Love. And we had just the best time talking about her journey, which is so fascinating, from being an investment banker and how she was matchmaking on the side and then really decided to jump ship from investment banking and go fully into matchmaking. So this is her full-time life now, and it's so fascinating to hear about the process that she goes through to support people that she is matchmaking. She has so much insight for any of you who are out there in the thick of dating, so you do not want to miss this one. Before we get going, if you are a high achieving Asian American leader who is ready to permanently reverse the cultural conditioning blocking you from stepping into your success and your power, DM me power on Instagram at Nicole Song and let's chat. Okay, friends, let's get into this amazing, fun conversation with Cassindy. Well, Cindy, thank you so much for being on the School of Self-Worth. I feel like we're already long lost friends, so I'm so glad you're here to chat with us today.
Oh, I'm so happy to be part of this. Thanks, Nicole.
Yeah, so Cassindy is a matchmaker, but really, we already were kind of chatting about dating before we started, and I'm holding back because I want also for all of you to hear about Cassindy's story because it's a fascinating one. Because you were, in like the full on finance Goldman Sachs world before you entered this matchmaking world. So, will you tell us first about your journey to how you got to be the person who matchmakes and does dating and all these other fun things?
Well, I always joke that I would never hire myself for finance because I just don't. Numbers are fine. I can make myself do it, but I don't enjoy it. And I really work so hard to be a good banker, but it never sang for me. And I kept on going back to this my happy time, which was in college when I set up over 100 people for the Asian Association blind date semi-formal. And it was so
What?
much
100
fun.
people is a lot.
Oh, yeah, from all over. And I practically flunked that semester too. I remember I kept having to drop classes and take them pass fail because I was having too much fun matchmaking people. But anyway, so here I'm in banking. I made it up the ranks, J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, but I just would always just daydream about more fun stuff, and I just really liked matchmaking people. And so, yeah, over time, I finally got the confidence to let it go and become a matchmaker. But it took a while because it's hard to let go of a very, but back then, as an Asian American, a prestigious, lucrative career, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Were you like secretly matchmaking people on the side while you were
All,
working all the time?
all, all the time. But meanwhile, just dating terribly myself. I was such a bad dater. It was like so awkward. It's such a klutz.
Dating is such a journey, which she and I were chatting about a little bit before too. But it's like learning to date is a skill set for sure. Okay, so then how did you really get that gumption to be like, this is actually what I want to do? Like, how did you know? Is it because you were matchmaking people on the side? Like, how did you hear really just like, this is what I need to spend
Oh,
my energy on?
well, a lot of life happens to you. I was still working really hard and I went into tech after finance. My mom, I was just doing a lot of things. But then I was reading an article and there was an article about some woman who was a matchmaker in Chicago. So I found her and she said she trained. And then I realized that this could be a career.
Mm.
So I found this matchmaker. I trained with her and, I did it part time for a while I was still doing, finance, but I always thought I really wanted to give it a try. So I did it part time, and then a few years ago I just went full time, and I'm not looking back. It's opened up so many more avenues, and I'm just so happy. I mean, I love working. I love meeting new people. I love sparking joy. I love bringing people together, and I feel like I can make a difference. Like in
Mm.
finance, I didn't feel like I really made a difference. I felt like I was just making other people richer.
Mhm. Well, one thing I noticed too, even as you talk about it to this day, it's like there's a total difference in energy in your face when you talk about matchmaking and dating versus finance. And, people who are on here and listening, a lot of them are trying to figure out their calling and what's next and like what do they want to do in their lives. And I always want people to understand and to see that, especially if like you're watching the video. So hold on. Excuse me. Um, but that difference and that spark to me is like such a clear indicator always of when people are really doing something that they love and they're here to do, like it just shows in their eyes. And so you can see it if you're watching the video or go watch the video and you
Ah,
can see it in Cassindy's face.
ah, well, it's true. And Nicole, what you're saying is what my friends would echo to me. They would say, like, Cassandra, you really should go into matchmaking. And I remember thinking, oh, no, 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 no. This is just a side hustle. But it really is just different in so many ways. Like, I'll give you an example. I was so in finance as an equity research analyst. We had to be on TV. We had media training. We'd have to do presentations, and I always would get so nervous at meetings. I was like, ugh, and I practiced and I do everything, but it was all very contrived, right? It almost felt like I was formulaic, following a pattern, but it just never felt authentic. Whereas with matchmaking, oh, I can talk all day long, and even with speaking and talking about it, it just comes very naturally. But I think part of that is kind of going back to your theme about having the confidence to go, well, I can do this, or I can make this something, and I deserve to do something that I actually enjoy versus having to suffer. And it's only worth it if you suffer.
Mm, yeah. I feel like that suffering is something like a lot of us learn when we were younger. It's like
Oh,
from your parents, you're just like, I must suffer so the family is proud, like that kind of feeling.
exactly. I can do it. I
Yeah.
remember feeling like a little duck, quack, quack, quack,
Yeah.
like quack, quack, quack. I can do it. That's so, I mean, thinking back now, if I could talk to my younger self, like, why? Why?
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, before we get into some of like the details of matchmaking and what you do with your business, I'm curious, like, how was your family when you decided to make that pivot? Like, did they have anything to say about it or thoughts about it? Or were you
Oh,
worried about that?
completely befuddled. I mean,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
I mean, no Asian American parent says, "Oh, work hard, study hard, grow up and be a matchmaker." No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Even matchmaking, I mean, so even finance was a stretch for them because my
Mm.
parents were scientists, right? I think my grandfather told me when I was like 12, when you grow up, you should get a Nobel Prize. I'm like, that ship has sailed. My grades aren't good enough. But no, I mean, it was always, very kind of high minded, education, PhD. No, I definitely didn't even go that route. I mean, I didn't go into the sciences. I tried, but I think a D minus in calculus kind of set the tone for that.
Yeah. You're like, this is not the route for me.
Nope.
Yeah. And so then when you went to finance, that was a stretch. And then obviously you were like, okay, peace out. I'm going to go be a matchmaker. They were just like,
It
okay.
absolutely it was a stretch, but I did go into tech for a while,
Hmm.
and I realized I was very good in operations and kind of the HR aspect, or the hiring and team growth aspect, and so that kind of got me more closer to a people adjacent
Mm.
area. But it wasn't until later on when I went through a lot of shifts in my life. My kids, I had 3 kids, that I finally had the confidence to start kind of letting go of these earlier expectations, and being okay with it,
Mm.
right? And being okay with letting that go and seeing what else comes in. It's almost like a bad boyfriend. Like you have to let go of the bad boyfriend in order for the new boyfriend to show up or
I
to
know.
have space.
Well, and it can be so hard to let go of the bad boyfriend because he's familiar.
Absolutely. And
Right.
also, as Asian Americans, right, there's a certain prestige in being able to say, oh, I'm in finance, right? Or I'm
Mhm.
in this, and that's, and that's a lot of ego to let go too, that we all have to kind of come to terms with and realize that it's just a false figment in our minds, and it doesn't feed our souls
Yeah. Mm.
at all.
Yeah, I'm so with you on that, right? And it takes a lot to just be like, okay, like I know who I am because I'm also my journey is journalism, then yoga teacher, and then
I saw
entrepreneur,
that.
right? Yeah, and
I
like
read that.
journalism didn't pay well, but it had the prestige. And so then,
Exactly.
right. But then leaving to teach yoga, that was like, my parents are actually very supportive, but they were definitely like, okay,
Right.
are
Yeah.
you going to make enough money? Can you pay your rent? It was more like that kind of worry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course, because they're it's uncharted territory.
totally.
But also, don't forget all the Asian aunties, right? The Asian auntie brigade.
Totally.
Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, my son, he's not so smart. He only earns blank, blank, blank. Oh, he works at drug company or whatever.
Right.
Like
Yeah, they're always, like, telling you about all the people. You're like, "Who are you talking about?" They're, like, giving you all the background of everybody. But yes,
exactly.
anyways, but, right, like, I think it is such a big thing, though, when you can finally shake that off and just be like, "Okay, like, they're gonna say whatever they're gonna say, and it's time for me to go the route that works best for me," and then that's where you landed then really in this matchmaking world.
Yeah, absolutely, and
Yeah.
it's part of our journey for all of us of growing
Mhm.
up. You know.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Like knowing who you are and being so clear and confident in that, like that's something so many of my women, I feel like they're just right on that cusp of like, I really want to be in that space. And so it's so fun to have the conversation with someone like you who's done that to be like, yeah, you can do it. Like you can go be a matchmaker. Like if that's calling you, like how cool. Seriously, I really feel that way. Like, yeah,
But from when you left journalism to pivot, it takes a lot of work,
yeah,
right?
for
It's
sure.
not this doesn't come easily either, and there's no prescribed path. There's no like formula, like, oh, you get this degree, then you get that. There's not. And so it is kind of an opportunity to craft your own journey, but have the confidence to craft it, you
Absolutely.
know?
Yeah, and I think that's always the hardest part because if you've climbed any kind of ladder, like I climbed the journalism ladder and you climb the finance ladder or the tech ladder, is that there is a ladder and it's usually like pretty prescribed and you know what you're supposed to do. But then when you exit the ladder, you're like, what I don't have one. And then like yoga had a ladder of sorts, but it did take time to start to climb it. But it's interesting when you diverge off of those pathways and then you're like, okay, how do I create my own ladder that works for me? Instead of what somebody
Exactly.
else did, and that is really, I think, very, very difficult for people sometimes to get their heads around.
It is. And so sometimes almost view it as like, kind of an opportunity,
Mhm.
right? Because I remember like I would try to fit myself back into finance jobs many, many times and going, I just really don't like this. I remember like I tried to become a restructuring specialist. Oh, so boring. Oh my gosh, the world's worst. And studying for the exam and just feeling like just so hopeless,
Mm,
right? And then finally realizing that it's really not a good fit for me to keep on trying to stuff myself into this wrong shaped, hole,
yeah,
right? It's just not going to work.
yeah, totally. Well, that's why you have to make the one that's like the shape of Cassindy or Nicole, like, it's like the perfect fit for you, but it can take some time, and work on. I mean, that's what I work with
Yeah,
people on specifically. It's like, how do we just like create that life the way you want it to be? And I love just being
yeah.
able to have someone like you who's like created your
Aw.
matchmaker.
Well, I think our community
Mhm.
is really lucky to have you because I think that you're trying to illuminate a path that there are paths that work,
Yeah,
right? Because I think for
yeah.
a lot of us, we're all kind of struggling, trying to think, how do we build this? How do we do this? It's uncharted, but we also need hope, right?
Mhm.
And so that's kind of where, your coaching and your guidance really makes a big difference because it helps people know that there is a path. You just have to kind of trust it,
Yeah.
because if you work at something, you usually are have a better chance of getting it than if you just sat there did nothing.
It's true. It's totally true.
Yeah,
And I appreciate you saying that. But I actually feel like I'm gonna bring it back to dating because I feel like this
sure.
is true
Okay,
about
okay.
dating. Well, no, I really do. I was sharing with Cassandra before, and people who are long-term listeners know this, is that I got divorced, right basically during COVID, and then, was dating again. And I was dating during the pandemic, which was hard enough in itself. And then really like sorting my way through dating in my 40s, which is totally different from when you're dating when you're younger, even
Mhm.
though I actually had only been married for 3 years. And so it hadn't been that long, but I hadn't really tackled dating from like a growth perspective, I would say, fully until I was doing it this last round. And then Cindy was telling me that some of her matchmaking, she does have people in Seattle. And I was like, if I had only known you 3 years ago, that would have really helped me out. But really, well, let's see. What is my question for you? Like, I'm curious about. There's a difference in distinction between dating really powerfully, and then I think also probably some of the matchmaking services that you offer. And so I'm curious about. Let's start with the matchmaking because I'm kind of curious about like when would somebody want to come to a matchmaker? What's the difference between matchmaking versus, just getting on an app and swiping through and kind of finding the people or is it the same process? It's just like a little bit different along the way.
It is a little different. So what I try to do is I try to understand each person,
Mhm.
right? Because I think each person has, in a way, a different formula for what works for them. So let me use the example of perhaps somebody who is, is recently divorced, right? And so you've been divorced. Now, usually we try not to work with people who are in the middle of separation just because it's not a good time,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of complications.
Yeah.
But let's just say somebody's already divorced and they may be divorced for certain reasons, maybe the person didn't respect their boundaries, right? Big issue, or whatever it may be. But sometimes their confidence may be a little bit shot, and so instead of saying going out on dates right away with the goal of finding the person, I might prescribe, or not, I might suggest something. I call it a dating buffet, which has, by the way, worked great. And so what it is, and people can DIY it too. You can
Yeah.
do it on yourself, on your own, with the apps and things like that. But basically, I say date 8 guys
Mm.
or 8 women and have your friends and family choose. But you just go on the dates. But then take very copious notes because you want to see how they make you feel. And the things that you think are on your checklist may not be what you really need.
Mm.
Right. And so at first, you kind of test out different things before you start honing in on, this is what I want. So for some people, I might just say, hey, we're going to be a dating journey. For others, that might be, you're looking for this, okay, and then let me go find you 6 people who fit that category, fit those criteria, right, and
Mm.
have you go on dates. I mean, it really depends. But I do really like the dating buffet because it really gives people a way of just kind of like knowing themselves too, like what matters to them and how the date made them feel. And that's important. I remember one client said to me, she goes, "Gosh, I didn't know how it felt to be cared for." And I was like, "Really?" Because she'd been married, she's a daughter, but date number 5 was this lovely gentleman. And when they were in the restaurant and the sun was kind of dappling in, he said, "Oh my gosh, the sun's hitting your face. Let me ask him to move the shades down."
Mm.
Right. And for her, she hadn't had that feeling before, for example,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I mean, I am always reflecting. I've been married for about a year and a half now, and like, yeah,
Yay.
and, like, I think all the time about the difference between this relationship and my last one, and it's not like, and I always say this because 'cause I'm not ever here to, like, bash my last one, like, I learned so much from it, there were so many great qualities into that first marriage, and, like, the difference of how I feel now is, like, really significant for me, and, in terms of, like, feeling so secure, feeling so safe, but I had to really,
Aw.
like, seek those things out, and, like, understand the qualities in the person who I'm with who would help me feel that way, which I
Hmm.
hadn't really like in my first one, I just wasn't even like, it didn't even occur to me that I needed to feel that way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that you deserve to feel that way
yeah,
too.
yeah.
I mean, there's a lot. I mean, especially with the Asian American population, there's a lot of issues with drawing boundaries,
Mhm.
with um, relationships that we mimic from what we see in our own
For
families,
sure.
right? There's a lot of there's a lot of nuance there for sure. And then, kind of as we are growing and realizing that we have agency over what we want and deserve to have what we want, then that shifts. And sometimes the people that we were originally dating or attracted to may not be the right ones for us. And it's just life, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. Well, and, like what you were saying too, like I had to do a lot of work around like what patterns did I grow up with in terms of like how my parents related to each other and really seeing like and so in my first relationship, there just wasn't a lot of emotional availability.
Yep.
But I would say not just from him, but from me. Like, I was also not really that emotionally available, but I didn't think that about myself. And so I had to really understand and learn, like, how I had been shut down that way in that relationship, and then recognize I had learned that pattern, in my own family, and then how to be that way with my husband now. And it was a lot. Like, that was like a really big journey. And I feel like
Hmm.
that's one, which like leads me to this question because I feel like what is it that people are thinking or don't even recognize that they actually do need that you find to be important or you like have to kind of nudge them and help them towards seeing like this is actually something that's pretty essential for long-term happiness in a relationship because I know for myself when I was younger it was all about like what does he do, like what activities does he like, does he make me laugh, like is he fun, do we really get along, like those are always my priorities and it's not like those things don't matter but there's so many other pieces that I had to really prioritize to get like an emotional match as well.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on so many, but for example, how to ask for help, right?
Mhm.
How do you ask for help and receive help? How do you give help? Um, how do you fight? How do you
Mhm.
disagree? Um, how do and also your relationships with your family, your parents around you, do they draw boundaries to protect you from their parents and vice
Mhm.
versa, right? There's, I mean, a lot to go there, but I generally feel that, as we're growing as people, I always have a phrase that what you put out influences what you attract back,
Mhm.
right? So if in the beginning, you know, years ago you were putting out a certain vibe, then that's what you're attracting back. It gets sometimes can get a little competitive. Oh, are you doing this? I'm doing this. And then later on, as you mellow out, maybe it's like, oh well, I find that I need some help here, and it's
Mhm.
just it's just different.
Yeah. Well, especially the help piece, I find for Asians, like, that's actually a really hard one. So how do you start to help
So
people?
hard.
Yeah, so how do you help them start to address, like, understanding how to ask for help in a relationship and also finding somebody who is that same way, like, open to giving help, also open to asking for it?
Sometimes you just have to kind of keep on saying it, rinse and repeat. So I
Mhm.
run a little entrepreneurship group, and I have a phrase in it that we all help each other. And everybody's like, yeah, I can do this, because we're all like, oh, I'm so capable, right? Everybody wants to show how capable they are. But I also tell everybody at the meetings, you have to bring an ask, right? And that's important. And I will model it myself too. Like, gosh, oh, you're really good. I need some help here. Or, oh, I would love to get some, SEO help or tips on, you know, how would you do this? And I think part of it is being able to say that I just don't know and I need some help there. Because I think with the Asian American upbringing was very conditional love, right?
Mhm.
You're lovable, Cassindy, because you're a very capable daughter. You, Cassindy, are lovable because you can get all these things done. That's it's hard over time, right? So learning to let go of that capability need is important, because otherwise it blocks you from the very things that you need,
Mm.
you
Yeah.
know?
I say this one a lot, but I always think it's really important. I remember Brene Brown talks about like components of trust. And one of the components of trust is asking for help, that people trust people who ask for help and they don't trust people who don't. Isn't that
Oh, that
fascinating?
is it is fascinating. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow, that
That
is true.
people
Yes,
don't
yes.
like people who are perfect at work. They don't trust them. They don't believe that they're like, I don't know, they don't have confidence in them. But if you ask for help, that they show that they're vulnerable and that they don't know
Oh,
everything and then they have a better relationship.
that is so wise. And it's interesting, right? Because I don't know about you, but growing up as a, you know, Asian daughter, it was all about like, oh, Sydney can do this and do that.
Mhm.
And it's exhausting.
Mhm.
It's exhausting. I also worked really hard on changing the narrative with my own parents too. I mean, my mother's now passed away, but she had cancer, and so during her final years, we had some great conversations. We talked a lot about, you know, taking on too much and stress and conditional love and being capable and being incapable. And it was really illuminating.
Mhm.
It was some important conversations. And I even yelled at my dad because he sends me these articles about how capable women behave. And I just got so mad at him. I go, your capable daughter is really tired. Your capable daughter took the frying pan, bam, bam, bam. Your capable daughter cooked dinner today, bam, bam, bam. Your capable daughter, took you to the doctor's appointment, bam, bam, bam. He's like, oh, but I thought it was important to let him know, like, cut it out.
Mm.
I don't want that anymore.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah, totally. It's true. I know, well, this is we're rewarded, right? When we're young, we're like and like we talk about this a lot here in terms of our self-worth journey. Like when you're rewarded for being capable and then you totally think that your self-worth is totally tied to that versus being like the truth of like you are worthy just because, not because you're doing a bunch of shit for your family, you know? Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. No, and I remember, like, I felt like I was a horse pulling this giant cart.
Mm.
I was pulling this giant cart. I remember, like, my parents both lost their jobs, so I gave them my bonus from work and all these things. Just like, I felt like it was like this harness. It was terrible. Like, this is miserable,
Yeah, and you're
you
like, "I
know.
don't wanna be in there." Well, I'm curious then for in terms of self-worth, like, what do you see then coming up, because I know you do have a specialty area focusing with Asian American women and men. Like, where does self-worth come up for them around dating? Like, where do they get challenged in that?
Well, quite often nobody draws boundaries.
Mm.
That's the first one. I'm like, you know, almost sounds terrible. It sounds I mean, I shouldn't stereotype, but almost every woman I've worked with doesn't draw boundaries well, and so we practice that,
How
you
does it
know.
show up?
And
Like, does it show up, like, in the date or, like
oh, well, this guy, took advantage of me, and
mm,
I did all this and did all that, but didn't appreciate me, things like that, right? So, and I'll say, well, maybe you don't need to do it for them all the time. And it's and how you start a relationship is so important because it's
mm,
very defining, right? Just
mhm,
like, I mean, this is very crass to say, but let's just say if you're on a first date and you hop into bed, okay, no judgment, but you can't unhop out of bed the next date, right? So it's almost like how you define the dates in the beginning are really important,
yeah,
right? If you're always doing things for the other person, then meanwhile you're resentful, then by the time, let's just say 3 months later, you're all resentful, it's not fair to the other person because they didn't know that you had this problem in the first place, right? So part of it is to kind of calm down our own inner must do, must take care, must do this, must do that, impetus, and slow it down and be able to not leap in to be that confident son, confident daughter,
yeah,
right? Because otherwise, you're always going to do this. If you love doing it, good for you. But most people, you can't sustain this 24/7. So then I always say, slow it down. Just think a little bit before you just jump straight into to solving problems, doing things all the time. Right? That's step one. That's pretty important. Um, and then let me see. So what was your question again?
just around the
Sorry.
places where people can struggle with self-worth when they're dating.
Self worth. Yeah. Well, so that leads into self worth. Because basically, you are valuable just by being you. Right.
Mhm,
You're not valuable solely because of all the capable things that you can do for the other person, right? And then also under the covers, right? Under the covers is important too because satisfaction and happiness is important, very much so,
mhm,
right? And I think you know for men and women there are performance anxiety issues, right? And you know relationships are when we're at the most vulnerable,
mhm,
right? It's a very vulnerable time, and it is important to be able to state out what really makes you happy and that you deserve to be happy there. And sometimes it takes a little longer than an average partner imagines, right?
mm.
So basically saying, don't fake it. It's not a recipe for good long term relationship success by faking it, right? You really want to just kind of explain to your partner what really matters. And it may take a little bit of time, but
Yeah.
you'll both be so much happier afterwards.
Well, and I even yeah, well, I love what you're saying
Sorry.
about all this. But even for me, it was, like, sort of like, on, like, the physical level, I had to do, like, subtle things for myself, but not be like, "Do you think I'm pretty? Are you attracted to me?" Like, asking that question all the time at the beginning because, like, my husband would be like, "Well, I wouldn't be here if I didn't think those things." And I had to just, like, shut it and just be like, "Oh, right." Like, I don't have to, like, constantly ask for validation. And it was always, like, a lack of self-worth or an insecurity that would, like, drive me to say that and be like, "Maybe he doesn't like me. Maybe he doesn't wanna be here with me." And then having to, like, catch myself and be like, "Nope, you're
Yeah.
not gonna say that because if you're a worthy person, like, he's here with you, so that's all you need to know," you know?
But it's
It is
hard.
hard. I'm
It's
telling it
so
to you
hard,
because
right?
it was so hard for me. Yeah.
It is hard.
Yeah.
I remember growing up, my parents were very like, oh, you're a little chubby. I'm like, well, great, mom. You walk like a duck. I'm like, great, mom.
Oh,
But,
I know.
but
Asian
but
parents are
your
very
parents,
blunt. Yeah.
oh, I know. She's like, oh, she'd always whack me in the back, bad posture, or like,
Mm,
you walk this way. I'm like, whatever.
mhm,
I think my mom said something to me. She said, "You're a failure as a daughter." This is years ago. And I was like, what? And she said, "You have a bad temper. You can't keep house, blah, blah, blah." And I was really hurt. And that was when I talked about this conversation I had with her over the years, because back then in her era, right, they were all like the 24-inch waist and they
mm,
all, whatever, right, in Taiwan. And I remember like spent many years with my mom talking about this, how much it hurt me. And I know she was trying. She said, well, okay, fine. She goes, you're a great son. You're a success as a son. I'm like, great, because I was, did well, blah, blah, blah. But, these things are hard.
Hmm.
It takes a lot to kind of push back and redefine, but we need to. It's important for the next generation.
Yeah. No, I do think it's so important. But that's why I love dating because I feel like it's such a really powerful place to be in growth and self development of like catching yourself, like you said, setting boundaries, feeling worthy, being like, how do I set the tone in this relationship from the very beginning so that,
So important.
right? So that you can have that future
And
place.
and if you love yourself and value yourself, then your partner will value and love you as well.
Hmm.
If you don't, then you're kind of giving a green light to the partner, like, oh, don't value me because I don't value myself. So it really is on us to examine ourselves and find ourselves lovable and
Hmm.
deserving.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Well, what would you say then for people like if they're on a dating journey, like when would a matchmaking be like a really good choice versus being on the dating journey?
Oh, I think a conversation is always a good start
Hmm.
because I do I do many conversations that aren't I don't match make them, but I just give them some ideas and tips.
Hmm.
Because for me, I mean, as a matchmaker, you really want to come kind of when you can help them. You get the right people in front of them and it works,
Mm,
right?
right.
That's very satisfying,
Yeah.
right? If it's going to be like a whole dating journey, then that's a different program, right?
Right.
That's my date buffet, so to speak, right? But I always like having that conversation, even in the beginning, if they come back maybe like 6 months later. And the reason why is just to kind of recalibrate. Like, look, you're out dating now. I really want you to think about what matters the most,
Hmm.
right? And you may have this checklist of what you think you need, but you really want to kind of think about in the whole totality what's going to matter. Like even if it's a first time marriage, right? You're looking to have kids and family. And I always talk about like, look, parents age, kids aren't always perfect, right? Who's your buddy? Who's your partner? Who do you trust? Who has your back, right? Is that what you want? Or do you want to be supporting somebody in their career? And how do you feel about that when that person is doing great because you're supporting them, but do you want support yourself? Right? There's lots of these questions I always kind of throw in there. I go, look, there's no judgment. There's no right or wrong answer. There's many, many different marriages that work. But I like to have the conversations early because then I can kind of go, I want you to think about this when you're on your dating journey. Right. And then when you have a little bit more of an idea, come to me, or we can even have conversations periodically. But when you're really ready to like nail it, then yeah, I'm your person. I'll
Mm,
get you in front of the right people.
mm. Yeah, that's amazing. That's so good to know because I do think it is really interesting when the timing is right for people for dating. Like, I think about my own journey. Like, I was dating when I was separated, and then like the divorce was done, and then boom, that's actually when I met my husband.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
it had to be done, and then I could be really open for what was next.
Exactly. Exactly. And I do that sometimes too, where I'll structure things a little differently. I'll say, look, like right now you're in an exploratory phase. So this is what I suggest you do now,
Hmm.
right? And then when you're ready, then boom,
Hmm.
we'll get you. But then you have a better idea. Like, okay, now I've kind of cleared. Sometimes after divorce, you would need to kind of play the field a little bit too, right? You need to,
Yeah,
and sometimes people will swing too much the other way, right? And that's fine.
yeah.
It's all part of a journey.
Right. Of just like seeing, okay, like when am I ready? What's that about? Yeah. And then what would you say too? Like, how do you, because we were talking about where you focus mostly like New York, LA, Bay Area. And then she said she knows some people in Seattle. So if anyone is listening in Seattle and wants some support,
I do. I
yeah.
actually do work with people in Seattle
Okay.
and in Vancouver as
Oh,
well.
okay. Yes.
Actually,
Yeah. Because they're
yes,
close
I do.
together. Like, what do you, are you always just kind of like have a network out there that you're looking to grow and evolve of like people who are available? Like, how does it look? I'm kind of curious, I guess, on the back end of like the matchmaker side. And you don't have to give away
Oh,
like, industry
no, no, no,
secrets,
no,
but I'm just curious.
no. No. I'm pretty open book. There are no secrets. So generally, like I tend to know where my strengths are, right? And
Hmm.
I have kind of a good population of people in my Rolodex slash database. And by the way, anybody can join my database for free.
Hmm.
Like I always put everybody in. But my concentration tends to be LA, Bay Area, New York for now,
Hmm.
right? Just because I have a good base there. Seattle, I've actually worked with a few clients there. So I think Seattle and maybe Boston would be my next two,
Hmm.
right? These are population areas. And once I have the network, right, then let's just say a client comes in and says, I am looking for, you know, somebody who's family oriented, right? Somebody who wants to have kids, who went to, reasonably good school, or, so there's certain things that people kind of ask for, right? And then I go on a hunt, and either they're already in my database, or I'm also on the Matchmakers Alliance, which is
Mm,
part of the top 70 matchmakers in the country. I'm part of that alliance. Um, but also, it's like, think of it like an executive recruiter. If it's a very, very specific hunt, especially for like some VIP clients who can't be online, just so they just cannot,
right.
then it's like an executive recruiter. I go and hunt them. I
Mm.
hunt them, very carefully.
Yeah.
Hello. But I can pretty much find most people one way or the other,
Yeah.
and kind of have inroads into them.
Oh, okay. That's so fun. And so you're like, okay, so you're just kind of like finding the people and then connecting them and figuring it out and then getting them to go on dates then from there.
And not just the dates itself are really interesting too, because how you set up that date is really important,
Mm,
right? Because a lot of times we meet tons of people, but if we're not receptive, we'll just meet them and won't happen. So I work really hard on finding kind of a date or an introduction that is a little bit unique. So for example, right, it's pouring buckets of rain here in California right now, but I have two people that are meeting, but I might say something like, you know, it's raining so much, and one of them they have artistic bent. Take a picture of what water means to you,
mm,
right? Or a family or favorite food that you grew up with, something that's a little different. I don't want them going into the date starting off with their, I went to this school, I achieved this. Who cares? I mean,
right.
every date's like that. Instead, it might be like, oh my gosh, your picture of the scallion pancake was really cute. I didn't know you could make them, or whatever. It's something that just makes it a little bit different, because even if the date doesn't end up having the right chemistry, I want people to feel like they really got to meet somebody, and
Mm,
they really got to know them in a way that was different than before. And it just, at least friendships can be sparked that way as well. I did an event down in LA, that was was in partnership with Coffee Meets Bagel, because they want people to go meet in real life, and we did a lot of these kind of different ways of meeting. Like asking questions that were a little bit different, a little more fun.
mhm.
Because otherwise, you know, time is precious,
Yeah.
right? And it's not just meeting a great date; it's also possibly meeting a friend who's got a cousin who's got a it's a small world.
Yeah. Well, I always thought that too. Like, I feel like dating, I was like, well, there's just a lot of interesting people out there. When people are nervous, I love the buffet. One of my clients actually did a dating buffet recently. She's like, Nicole, I'm going to sample from the dating buffet. I was like, you go, you go do that. But it is like that because you also don't even, like you said, you don't even know sometimes what you want or don't want. And then if you
Exactly.
can just go in being like, well, I'm going to just like meet a cool person. And I found in general, like I found like very interesting people and like pretty funny people, like quirky sometimes. And I'm like, well, the quirky is also interesting in its own way. Like you just learn things about people by having
Well,
conversations.
well, I think you're also a very naturally curious person,
Yeah.
right? But that's open. That's important, because that means you're also open.
Yeah.
A lot of people are not open,
Mm,
right? And you think about, from the person on the other side, if somebody's curious about them, it brings out their better self, right?
yeah.
Because they're like, oh, wow, this person's actually curious about me and actually wants to see me, right? And that makes them rise to the occasion too, to want to see you too,
Mhm.
right? And that's really, really important.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying then is like really like the energy that you're bringing into that date is super important for you just to be on like that right trajectory when you're trying to meet somebody.
Yeah, because otherwise it's a waste of time. You can have two people that really should are quite compatible, but just because they met under the wrong mood or whatever,
Mhm.
then they just glide past each other, and it's a waste of, as a matchmaker, it takes a lot of my time to curate these matches. I
Right.
really go out of my way to find somebody special. So I really don't want them to not have it happen because they were just, unopened at the time,
Mm,
right?
yeah. What is your best moment as a matchmaker? Is it like the first date hits off or is it like when they get engaged? I mean, I don't even know like what's success for you or like when you feel like
Oh,
super excited about what happened.
it's there's two different. I mean, obviously the typical one is, oh my gosh, we're committed.
Mm,
And it's, that obviously is a very, very standard one. But what hits me really well is like when somebody who started off on the dating journey was very I don't know if I deserve anybody. I don't, is this as good as it's going to get? When they let that part go and go, oh my gosh, I had so much fun. Oh, I met somebody really special, right? That to me is like, yes, because their, their, their whole, their outlook, their lifestyle is improving as a person. They may have been really battered down before. But to me, that's a huge one. I mean, just recently, just a couple of weeks ago, I got a case of 6 wines from a very famous vineyard. I was like, yes. And, it was a gentleman who was very happy. And so, I get these gifts that are really kind of sweet and they really make me happy. Um, Another one of my favorite clients was an ER doctor and who was always devoted to helping other people. And I remember like she was just so in her own space. I was like, oh my God, I need you to stop doing this. And I remember like they got married, but it was funny because she's like, he wants to go house hunting. He goes, I already have a home and he's got a home. I'm like, oh my gosh, you must go. And I'm like, why? I'm like, really, why? Duh. I can't say duh. I go, wow. Do you think that maybe he wants to buy a house together? She's like, no. But yes.
That's what he wanted. Yeah.
But, so it's like these kind of delightful moments that really just make me laugh. It just really makes me happy. It's what makes it so worth it.
Yeah.
Like, no finance deal would ever have had this much fun.
Yeah. Well, I love that too. You're just sort of like helping them because it is like dating is possibility, right? Like the possibility of partnership and all of these different things that come along. And I always laugh because I'm sure that a lot of your clients are like the way I was when I was dating my husband, where I was like, used to being in charge or kind of being in control or like dictating the pace of things. And then the big change with him was like, I would say, okay, well, I think that, we should be in a relationship that's like headed to marriage. And he's like, okay. He's like, well, then I think we should move in together. And I was like, what? And he's like, well, if we're going to get married, we should live together. And I was like, oh, okay. But that's when I knew this was the kind of person I wanted to be with. Like, cause he up leveled me. He didn't just let me drive, where we were going.
Yeah.
He was like, he'd push me and then I would freak out and then say yes, but I think especially,
but he won your respect.
Totally. And I think I'm sure you have a lot of women like me, like really smart in like their careers and other parts of their lives, but with dating, like they can struggle more with like how to really navigate and have like, to me, equal partnership is so important. And like that's when he kept showing me he was an equal partner in life, and you're just like, okay, emotionally in all the levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. And it's a sign of your own growth that you recognize that and appreciate that and don't take umbrage with that, because the old person would have been like, well, I'm still under control. Well, but part of it's like, oh wait, that is really good. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so
it's
appreciation for people, for them and what they bring too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Cassindy, it's such a fun conversation with you. I love talking about dating. I love what you do. I love that if there's anyone listening who's like, because I have some clients who are like dating or kind of like dabbling, and I'm like, if you're feeling the call for Cassindy, like for sure, get in touch with her. Yeah. So she's probably got something for you. But it is time for our rapid fire questions. Are you ready for them?
Oh,
we have a few.
Sure.
They're super fun. They're easy. They're super
Okay.
easy. Yeah.
Okay.
So what was the last thing you watched on TV?
Oh, Carry On. It was the movie on Netflix.
Oh, I have not watched it, but that sounds fun. What was it about?
It was actually it's not my normal thing. It was a kind of a thriller with Justin Bateman, and basically about a terrorist in an airport with a chemical weapon bomb. Like completely not my thing.
Intense.
I mean, it's more my husband's thing, but I really enjoy the dialogue.
Okay, good to know. Okay, awesome. What is on your nightstand?
Oh, cat treats.
Cat treats. I love that. That's a first, actually.
to lure my kitten. I foster cats, and I have a kitten that I love when he comes and snuggles. So I put cat treats
so that
on
he'll
there.
come. Oh,
yeah, I know, so bad.
That's so cute. Okay, next one is, when was the last time you tried something new, and what was it?
Oh, just this weekend, my cousin, I was in LA, told me about this amazing bakery And so I actually drove an hour and a half to go there to wait at 8 in the morning for the most amazing blue masa sourdough cornbread at 6100 Bakery, and it was life changing.
Oh,
So good, so good.
love that. That's awesome.
I mean, I'm like, I'm like trying to lose weight, so I normally don't do carbs, right? But I'm like, okay, fine, I'll go do this, and it was so good. In fact, I have a piece of this toast that I brought back from Santa Ana.
That's
So
amazing for anybody who lives down there. Yeah, go check out 6100 Bakery.
I know, I'm like, okay.
Okay. Okay. Last one is, what are your top 3 most used emojis on your phone?
Oh, I don't know what's on my phone, but it's the two hearts,
Mm.
um, the one with the the happy face with the kiss,
Mhm.
and then I don't know what the third one is. I think I use those all the time. Oh, I have a little mahjong tile
Yeah.
because I teach mahjong on Tuesdays, so I've been using that one a lot.
Oh, that's so fun. I wish I would live near you. I mean, I know how to play mahjong, but I'm always trying to play more. Well, thank you so much for being on the School of Self Worth and sharing your journey and then sharing so much about what you do. Such a great conversation. So thank you for being with us.